Logan, who do you have at number 7?
All right, I'm going to preface this by saying I think this guy has an argument for number one because of the context of his era, and it's Bill Russell.
Hmm.
Um,
It's all right, Logan. It's
I
all
no,
right.
I, we look. I hashed this out with Carson a long time ago when we were ranking the top 10 peaks of all time, and I had Bill. I think it. I want to say number 10 because we were including like
Yeah.
21st century as well too. I just have a fundamental issue when I'm thinking of a basketball player, and I get that this is maybe not the best way to go about it. I just have a problem putting a guy that is as limited offensively as Bill Russell any higher than this spot. And I understand it. It's like he didn't need to be that. He did his job to perfection. And so it's like, how am I going to hate on a guy who did exactly what he's supposed to do? He made them the best defense ever. You know, every year they were the number one defense. They had offensive guys around him. He was a really good transition passer, too. Like, people act, that is the one thing that I do take issue with when people talk about Bill Russell is that he was an offensive zero. And that's not true, right? He was good on the offensive glass, could go back up with stuff, could do simple finishing openly, and was a solid passer and playmaker out of the post and like an uber intelligent basketball player. But when we're getting down into it, I just can't have a guy who's this offensively limited any higher. And I get maybe that's not the best way to think about these things because he was the best answer to Wilt Chamberlain. He led to the ultimate team success. They were elite defenses every single year, but nobody else higher than Bill on this list is as offensively limited, and that's why he's here. So
I obviously I vehemently disagree. Like
So do I.
As far as disagreement can go, I'm on like a 99 on a scale of 100 in terms of disagreement. But John G, where do you stand, real quick?
Because I know you guys are big Bill Russell guys, so I wanted to go before you guys go on your rants because I know it's coming. But I think Bill Russell, with what he provided in that era of time, is just limited spacing, a lot of baskets around the rim, and if you're taking away that possession after possession, that makes you extremely valuable. To where the Boston Celtics were routinely the best defense in the NBA, and I don't even think their offenses were that good, you know. And I still think they
were bad.
Exactly.
They the worst offense in basketball 3 times in Bill Russell's tenure, and they won the title every year.
Before we move any further in this video, I want to say thank you to the guys at NerdSesh for collabing with us on this video. With this video concluding, we now have our top 10 pre-2000 peaks and our top 10 post-2000 peaks out on this channel. And if you guys would like to check out the top 10 post-2000 NBA peaks, that video will be on this channel as well. And if you guys want to look at Nerd Sessions content with their film breakdowns and their basketball analysis and their top 10s and their rankings on their channel, their link will be in the description below. And with that being said, let's get back to the video.
League and net rating.
Much better than everybody else defensively.
Yeah, so I truly think once it comes down to a value, there's not, even to somebody that we're probably going to get into very soon, his two-way ability just did not outmatch the level of defense that Bill Russell led and provided for multiple years, to where the defense alone, even with a below average offense, could still win you a title multiple times. So yeah, you guys have the floor. I know where you guys are going.
Yeah, go ahead, Carson.
There's just no comparison for it in NBA history. And that's where I think, Logan, you're just applying criteria from era's sense that do not work when you're talking about 60s basketball. It's like John D said, this is an era when everybody is trying to get to the rim. And if you are forcing the offense to settle for jumpers, that's a win because people just aren't great jump shooters and everything counts for 2 points. Bill Russell is by far the greatest deterrent and rim protector and defensive player in NBA history. I just watched a game from the 63 finals. He had 8 blocks, a couple in the mountain space too, by the way, on Jerry West pull-ups, because he is one of the most mobile defensive bigs ever. Even though this was the 1960s, that wasn't like an overly prioritized skill set, but he's 6'9", crazy agility with his length, with his vertical athleticism, smartest defensive player, best instincts, all-time great rebounder. And the guy fueled 12 number 1 defenses in 13 years. They were not a good defense before he got there. He automatically makes them a number 1 defense. He leaves, they're the number 1 defense in 69, and they immediately fall off to being a below average defense. Again, that is value on that side of the ball that nobody since has matched on either side of the ball. When you're just talking about singularly one side of the ball being that overwhelmingly dominant and impactful, there is no comparison for Bill Russell's defense. Magic Johnson's offense does not compare to Bill Russell's defense. It's not even close. You could be a bad offense, and they were a bad offense more often than not, and still win the title because they're 6 points better in terms of defensive rating than the second best defense in basketball. Like basically all of the best relative defensive ratings, if we include the pre-3-point era, are the 60 Celtics, and anybody else who's cracking that club should be honored to do so. I also think he is probably underrated offensively, especially when you're looking at his peak around like 62 and 63. Across those two postseasons, he's giving you 21 points per game on plus 3% relative true shooting with his 26 rebounds and 5 assists per game. And so much of the Celtics offense at this time was run through Bill Russell. This is a team that is running handoff after handoff after handoff. Who makes that viable? It's their great passing big who's able to facilitate those actions, who's able to spot cutters, who is able to start the fast break consistently as really the first sort of grab and go center in history, a really good outlet passer. But it really just comes down to the fact that, yeah, this is the weakest offensive player on the list, but was a good offensive player whose defensive impact is completely unparalleled and was far and away the driving factor of the greatest dynasty in basketball history. They were winning title after title with Cousy, post Cousy, before Hondo, with Hondo. Like all that mattered was Bill Russell in this defense. And that's why he has to be higher than this to me. I probably don't have him as high as Mars, but this is too low. If you're going to look at one-way greats and compare him and Magic, not only do I think that Bill Russell is clearly a better offensive player than Magic is a defensive player, the gap in terms of the value of Russell being the GOAT defensively compared to Magic, even if you think he's the GOAT offensively, it's still there. And I just have to have Russell higher.
I think the biggest reason why I disagree is because I think in theory, and we're all relatively young, we've grown up, and even our parents have grown up. Individual offense was more valuable than individual defense. That's been the case from 1980 through the 90s. Maybe you could argue in the early 2000s it was a bit different. Maybe you could argue that. But all the way through up till now, individual offense is more valuable than individual defense. The only era in which I find that to be very clearly not true is the 60s. Individual defense was, to me, far and away more valuable than individual offense. I think if I wanted to use an example, I would just be like, there was one team that dominated defensively and were bad offensively in the Boston Celtics, and there was another team that dominated offensively and sucked on defense in the Cincinnati Royals, and there was a very clear, distinct level of winning. One was very far more impactful than the other, and I think Bill Russell plays defense better, more impactfully than any player plays either side of the ball in NBA history. Whoever you think the best offensive player is, they physically are not capable of being more impactful offensively than Bill Russell was capable of being defensively. And then you look at it from a skill set perspective. He was 6'9", if I want to be nice, 6'10", 235, moved like a wing, was able to run faster than everyone on the court, could get off the ground quicker than anyone in the NBA. His timing was amazing. He never fouled. And he was blocking, like Carson said, 8 shots in the game he watched. I believe when other people do their individual tracking, it's around 8 shots a game. He was the best or the second best rebounder in the sport. And he was the single biggest deterrent of the most valuable shot anyone could have got in the NBA for a decade plus. And then you look at his peak, where I do think he was a positive offensive player, being that post hub, being that playmaker for their half-court offense, sparking a lot of their fast breaks, being that grab and go guy. Whether that's him grabbing and physically going or outlets, getting guys in transition. Boston couldn't score consistently in the half court. So what did Bill Russell do? Hey, we just don't need to play half court offense. I'm going to make sure that they aren't scoring. We're running. They dominated the possession game. It's just hard for me to say that a player who is the most dominant on, in my opinion, the most valuable side of the ball can be below the top 5. I'm going to say the top 5. I'm going to be kind. It's hard for me to do that. And I understand he's a flawed offensive player, but I think it shouldn't matter as much as it does to you. And I think it does because you're used to offense individually outweighing defense, which I'm not saying is wrong, because I think it's true for today's game and the 2010s. And then I think it's true for every era in NBA history. besides the era in which Bill Russell played. So I think you're probably holding Bill Russell to a standard that just didn't apply to Bill Russell. And I think that's probably why I disagree as much as I do. But if you want to defend
I
yourself,
couldn't
you
agree
can.
more, Mars. I just want to say real quick, I could not agree more with that. I think that is by far the reason that Bill Russell is so underrated. It's people applying a framework to him that makes total sense for modern basketball that does not make sense for 1960s basketball because of the reality of the game and the impact that a single defensive player could have of Bill Russell's caliber, which is unlike anything we've ever seen since.
Yeah. Logan, is there anything you want to say?
No, I mean, I've heard this case a million times at this point. That's why I knew this was coming. Like, I'm over here pushing buttons, man. Like, you know, like I knew this was what we were going to open the door to. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sticking to my guns. I've made this argument before. Yeah, I mean, there's better two-way guys. I get it. It's not. That's why I say he has a GOAT case. This is my opinion, and if all of that applies and you want to put him number one, I have no issue with that. I think Bill Russell has a legitimate case, but that's not my criteria. And yeah, I mean, I just like, for example, I just think like the level that Wilt reached offensively and like the two-way peak that he has surpasses Bill. And like, that's a line that I'm going to draw just because he was so clearly the best offensive player while being a really impactful defensive player.
We haven't gotten to Wilt though.
I know.
I think that's another conversation.
That's an
Who knows?
example.
I might have Wilt's peak over Bill Russell's. You don't know.
I think you should.
I just don't have Bill Russell at seven.
I just want to be
I
clear.
just know that.
I'm not dense. I fully understand all these arguments. I just disagree.